What is up, YouTube? Today, we're gonna make this 2.5D scrolling effect right on Webflow. It's super easy, requires zero code whatsoever, and best of all, you can use the techniques you learned today on any type of project that requires this level of interaction. So let's get started. Let's first talk about the key art, the primary asset we're going to be animating in Webflow. I generated it through Midjourney. I started exploring kind of the scene of a person walking through an empty street at night. So I wanted it to be really dramatic in that way. The biggest thing to look for when you're creating this effect is a clear separation between your foreground, middle ground, and background layers, because that's really what's going to create this parallax depth effect that we're trying to achieve. And you can see here in some of the results that I got, there are some separation, but it's clearly lacking the exaggerated foreground, middle ground, and background. I eventually landed on this image right here because I could see myself cutting some of these buildings out to create that separation even further. This old man is standing close enough to the camera that I can actually use him as my primary foreground. So I actually stumbled upon this image right here. I decided on using this image and compositing it with the other image. So these are the elements from the first image, and these are the elements from the second image. And the goal is to just kind of combine both of them, right? One thing that you'll notice here is that the sky has also been cut out of this image. Why did I do that? Well, while I was kind of going through the process of terribly masking things out and cutting elements out, as you can see this sloppy job right here, is that it might actually be a really cool effect to play around with animating the sky itself, just to really exaggerate that effect. So they all kind of come together just like this. As you can see here, I've also gone ahead and contained them into this box to create this like world inside of this scene. It's kind of like a little window. This is another technique that I'm relying on to exaggerate the effect that we're going for without adding too much complexity to the overall process. We want the experience to be that, you know, we lock onto this frame, this kind of shot right here, and as the user scrolls, we're pushing into the scene. So how do we do that? Well, first, we need to have position sticky implemented, and then we'll do all of our animations through while scrolling in view interaction. We want to, of course, make this responsive and be fluid so that as the browser kind of grows and shrinks, it maintains its aspect ratio, because you can see here, there's a clear kind of squarish little portal window, let's call it. In that portal window is where all of our little elements are that we're going to be pushing in and out and growing and shrinking and all that stuff. All right, here we are in Webflow. Let's go ahead and put this thing together. Awesome. Okay, so let's just jump right in. The first thing, just best practice. So let's name this section. Let's do section, main scene, whatever. Awful with names, so there's that. The only thing I might change with this section is the background. So let's set a black background there. All right, we got our section main scene. So in here, we need to add all the necessary items to create this kind of scrolling experience. And no matter what you're making, if you're making the scrolling experience, this is pretty much the same workflow. So it's not just unique to this particular project. So the very first thing you need is a div that has a height specified to it, because this is basically the track where as the user travels down that space, we can add keyframes in our animation. Here, I like to use like camera terms for specifically for this type of interaction. So no matter the project I'm using, I'm always using track where I specify the height, and then camera where I specify the sticky position. Our kind of parent div needs to hold a pretty big height, so I'll do 800 DVH. I'm using DVH here just to account for any kind of default browser UI elements that may pop in and out, and I just want to make sure that I have full control and it's always kind of spanning the entirety of the viewport. Just leave it like that for now. We don't really need to do anything else. This is strictly to determine the height. So the next thing you need outside of the track, like I mentioned, is a camera. So let's call this main scene camera. Okay, so this is what's going to be, this is our camera. This is what's always going to be on the screen It's gonna be locked into place. So with the main scene camera, we want it to be full screen, right? I'm gonna set 100 dVH on this as well. So it's gonna be 100% of the viewport height, and by doing that it's also going to be kind of stretching to the width as well, so we can just leave the width auto. And then because there's going to be all sorts of stuff flying in and out, and we're scaling things, and you know, widths are changing and things like that, I like to just set this to overflow hidden, just so we don't experience any horizontal scrolling. All right, moving down, of course we want this position sticky. That's what's gonna make sure that as we scroll through this super tall track, the camera is always in the center of our viewport. So the thing with sticky, you always have to specify a position top 0 if you're positioning it top 0, or if you're sticking to the bottom, you position it down there. But yeah, here, let's just position that 0. That'll make sure that the sticky functionality works properly. I'm not going to be adding anything else on this camera, just the height, overflow, and then the sticky. I want to make sure that my divs are organized and I'm not packing in like layout stuff in here like Flexbox or anything like that. The way we're going to do that is we're going to add another div in here. Let's call this main scene container. Okay. So main scene container will hold all of our properties that will center things and make things nicely laid out. So if we look at our design again, everything is kind of nicely centered on the screen, and we want to make sure it's done that way. And the best way to do that, or the fastest way to do that, is using Flexbox. So here's our flex, set this to vertical and align it just centered. So that just means it's always gonna be vertically kind of centered on the screen. And then from there, we'll just set our height to 100%. Here in our main scene container, just to be sure, let's also set this one to overflow hidden. So actually in our camera, we could remove this and just set the container here. So now the camera is truly just a camera. It's positioned and it's setting the height. So we have our container. So now anything we drop on here, so if I drop a div, it'll kind of magically be on the center. Well, not magically, because we use Flexbox. So looking back at this again, like I mentioned, we needed to set up our sticky scrolling experience, which we just did. We have our track, we have our camera, everything's looking nice. And then we also even included a container to position everything else centered on the screen. So now we need to create a div that will maintain its aspect ratio regardless of our browser width and height, right? So how do we do that? So let's start that now. So we need two things for this to work. First is a parent container, which I referred to this as a portal. So we'll keep calling it a portal. Portal window wrapper, all right? So you just need a parent element here. I'll call it as a wrapper. So it's a really weird way to go about this. First, you need a specified width. So here, because if I set this to 100%, it's just gonna span the entire thing. So we need to kind of do a different route here. I'll do device viewport width, okay? So I'm not doing pixels or RAM or anything like that, because again, I want this to kind of be fluid depending on the size of the viewport. So in this case, because it's width, it's dependent on the viewport width. To draw the height, we don't specify it here. This is the weird, tricky part. To maintain the aspect ratio, you actually draw the height using padding. And not only that, but you use percentage. It's a really weird kind of thing about CSS, which is the language, the programming language that all of this kind of converts into. But this now means that it's 33% of the parent's width, basically. So there you go. So we have 33% there. So now as this browser grows and shrinks, it's always this box will maintain its aspect ratio. So that's exactly what we want, right? The next thing we'll want to do for this to work is set this to position relative. It's because we don't just start dumping all of our images in here. We need another div to live inside of this wrapper to kind of fulfill this tricky aspect ratio thing. So you can see here, because I've dropped this div, there's all this top padding here because we've specified a 33% padding, duh. So here we need a container. So let's call this portal window container. And this container will want the width to be 100% and the height to be 100%, just full, basically. And then we also want this to be position absolute. So that means that that padding no longer influences it. But wait, it's influencing it right now. It's because we haven't set our position values here yet. So make sure to set that. So we want it to be full. So we just click that button and magically it's kind of up there. Right, so now this container is inside of our wrapper right here, and it's also positioned absolutely, right? So this means that as our browser grows and shrinks, it'll always maintain kind of this aspect ratio. So now we have the aspect ratio thing set up, so that's all good. The next thing we need to do to this container is just, there's a design element here of this border radius, so let's just go ahead and add that, okay? So here is the border radius. I think it's like 40 pixels, but actually let's convert this to rem by just doing /16 rem, and magically Webflow will convert that to the proper rem value. Okay, so now there's a border radius in there. Can't see it because there's nothing in there, but it's in there. Cool. All right, so all we have to do now is just start dropping our elements in here. We have a few elements to work with. So this is our container here, and then these are all of the images. Because they're all going to be stacked on top of each other, we need to use z-index property to control the layers and to control what's on top of what. So the very first thing is at the bottom, we have the sky. So let's just place the sky now. So let's drop an image, and I've already preloaded it, and here is our sky. So let's just make sure that we're being good and having classes on these, because we are going to be, manipulating this and adding some styles to it. So you don't want this to just be a random image thing. So this one, let's call it portal object sky. We'll set this to display block. Just make sure it's 100%. We are going to set the fit to cover. Okay. All right, and then the position, let's set that one to absolute. And let's just set that to full because it's fully in the background. So we can just do that, right? And then the z-index, let's set it to low, so just like 1. And then everything else will be, so the sky will be 1, and then this one will be 2, and then the walls will be 3. So let's drop another image in, not a div, an image, there we go. So this one will be portal object, let's call this one background. And let's choose the image. This is our background image. So it's all the way back there because we haven't set anything yet. Same deal, we want to make sure this is all 100%. And with our background, we actually don't need it to be absolutely positioned because we're not really manipulating it or nudging it or doing anything. So I could just set this to relative, and all we need to do is make sure that it has a 2 z-index. We can't set this to just static because then you don't have the option to set a z-index on it. So you have to just make it relative to itself. And then you can set a 2 z-index on it. So now our sky is back there, and then here's our background. All right, let's drop in 2 more images here. Keep typing div. All right, let's do the left wall. Let's do portal object, whoops, left wall. Cool. Same deal, convert it to block, 100%. Actually, with this one, we don't want a width of 100%, but we do want a height of 100%. And that's really because we want to keep, so this asset, you can see it's a tall rectangle. If I make it 100%, it's going to span the entirety of the parent container. This one, set it to fill, that's fine for now. This one, we do want to set absolute. And then let's set it to the left there. So it's just auto on the right. And then, like I said, it's gonna be the highest z-index because it's all the way at the front. Cool. So right now it's positioned nicely. Maybe we can move it out a little bit up, and you can see, we're seeing it kind of outside of our container. Let me just do 0 here and make sure that our container is set to overflow hidden. So now if I manipulate, well, first now you can see the rounded edge there, the rounded corner. And then also if I move this, you can see it gets cropped out, which is what we want. All right, so let me just set this to 0 for now. And let's drop in our last image. This will be portal object right wall. right wall. Okay, select that image. Here's our right wall. Same deal. If I want it to be good, I probably, oops, no width. I probably can create like a more global looking class so I don't have to keep typing these things, but it's all good. All right, absolute, position it to the right and set the Z index to 3. Cool, so now it's starting to look like our final look here. With the right wall, you can kind of see it's much bigger here. Same with this one. So we're gonna be playing around with the scale in just a second, but let's keep pushing through here. So we have our right wall, we have our left wall. Cool, our portal, for all intents and purposes, is set up. All right, we got a beautiful looking portal here to this dimension. The next thing that we need to work on is our old man, our main character. So the thing is, because we've spent so much work setting this up so that it maintains the aspect ratio, we also want to make sure this man scales with everything else. We don't want the world to be, or this portal to be growing and shrinking, and the old man is not growing and shrinking at the same rate. And to do that, we're going to position the old man inside of our portal window wrapper. Not the container, because the container, if you recall, we have an overflow hidden on it, which means we wouldn't be able to get this effect where he's kind of jutting out of it, right? So we're gonna position him, or we're gonna put him inside of window wrapper. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna drop an image, not even use a div for him, because that's totally fine. All right, so right now everything's stretching and looking wild because we need to set some values for this guy. So let's call him man image, set him to a display of block, and then also we'll set a percentage width on him. And because we've set a percentage width on him, we're now able to center him on the screen because that's where he's sitting there. Cool. And then we'll set a height of 100% just so that he's always kind of spanning this entire wrapper. Then moving on down, we do, because we've set a height of 100%, that's going to stretch the image and we don't want that. So we'll set this to contain. Then just to fix all this craziness happening here, we'll set this to position absolute. So now he's like that. And then now that we have positioned absolute, we can set this man up here to, let's do 40% to just move him up. Then also we got to bring him to the forefront. Right now he's still on the left because of some of these values here. So let's just do that. And then by zeroing it out instead of auto, now he's kind of, you know, chilling right in the middle, right where we want him. And that's it, there's our guy, easy enough. And so now if we, as we scale, he's kind of, you know, moving with everyone else. So that's exactly what we want. All right, there we go. All of our elements are on the screen, and the next step is to work on our interactions. So let's open up the interactions panel. Cool, so like we mentioned, so we have the interactions panel opened up, but we do want to make sure we have track selected. Everything is gonna happen on this track. And anytime you're working with, or you're doing this technique of a scroll interaction, you want your trigger to be set on the track, because this is the thing that has the really tall height on it. And the actual trigger that we want to use is while scrolling in view. So this is a continuous interaction, animate while element scrolls through viewport. And it's gonna scroll through the viewport, and it's super tall, so it gives us a lot of room to play with, yeah? So here on scroll, let's start a new scroll interaction, and let's set up our animation boundaries. Let's go ahead and click that. And we do want it when it starts entering, but let's add a little bit of offset. Let's set this to 35%. And then also end animation 100% when element is fully invisible, so that's fine. We actually don't need an offset, so let's just leave that there. Cool, all right, so let's add our new scroll interaction. Let's just call this, I don't know, main scene or whatever, and start animating away. Okay, let's work on the sky, okay? So let's open up all of the stuff. So here it is. So at 0%, I'm gonna move it on the Y, 0, and then at 100, when we complete the whole thing, let's move it just a little bit up, which is, let's do -20 pixels. Cool. So I'm just gonna be using pixels just to make our lives easier, but you know, of course, you should probably be using a better unit of measurement, like percentage or rem or anything like that. But we'll stick to pixels to make this easy for everyone. The next thing is let's animate the background. Let's select object background and still at 0%. Also a move on the background. We'll animate the Y as well. It goes from 0 all the way to 60 pixels down. So already there's this kind of competing thing happening that's gonna really exaggerate this 2.5D effect because the sky is kind of moving upwards and then the background is moving downwards. So it's gonna have this like really wild kind of effect. Look, see, it's like opening up. So that's gonna be really awesome. Let's turn off live preview and keep going down the list here. We want our right wall to also move, but this one, our right wall, is going to be on the x-axis. So let's just set that to 0 at 100%. Let's just move it like a little bit like that. We don't want it too much, just a tiny bit. When you're working with this type of stuff, it's often tempting to really like move it all the way, but I think it's much better if it's like a really subtle move. The last one is the left wall. So we'll move that from 0. And with this one, let's move it like that much. This one, let's move it a lot. Like, let's really open things up here. Okay, awesome. All right, so now we have all of our key components kind of moving where they need to move to. So let's just quickly preview that right now. Let me hide the navigator here. So you see, it's kind of like, whoa, it's like opening up nicely here. All right, let's take this one step further and push into the scene. So how are we gonna do that? There's a few ways to do that. You can use z-index and transforms and things like that, but I want everything to basically just scale. What we're gonna wanna do is just scale our wrapper up so everything kind of zooms in, essentially. It gives you like that cool feeling. So here, I'm gonna use scale and just set this to 1 because that's our starting point. And then the end of it, 2 times maybe. Yeah. So let's go 2 on it. So now, check out this effect. Let's do live preview. Let's just save it first and then go in here. All right, so as we scroll, it's not only animating in, it's also scaling up nicely, right? And then when we hit the bottom, we kind of just go down here. So there you go. This is basically it, right? And then now you can just kind of tweak the values here to see how much do you want to push and kind of stretch this image and all that good stuff. All right, the last thing I kind of want to do here because in our designs, we do have these balls here, and I think we can kind of get the same point across just by having a background video. So I'm gonna add actually a background element in here. So let's just do a background video. I'm gonna turn our main scene camera into a background video just to be super immersive with it. All right. So how I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna move this and then put it inside of here and then change this to main scene camera, remove our main scene camera. Then in the background video settings, I'm going to remove include play and pause button and set the autoplay to video and then also loop the video. And then we also want to add our actual video. So I have this like crazy stock image that I downloaded from Storyblocks that's going to be kind of a starry night type of vibe. So there's our background video. It's super bright. We don't want it to be that intense. Kind of ruins the vibe. So let's add a background color on our container. Let's do a black and then also reduce the opacity here so that we get a little bit of transparency. Let's park it right at about 80%. Yeah. So by doing that, you can kind of see it's super subtle in the background, and you know, it's up to you to tweak that even further. So now we even have like a much more immersive feel to it. See, we didn't even have to code it. We could just use a background video. There you have it, a beautiful scroll interaction. Add text and some page load-ins, and you have yourself a super cinematic web experience. I hope you found that helpful. Hit the like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.